Hello, everyone out there. I can't exactly see you, obviously, but welcome. I'm glad you're here. Hopefully, in the next short time period, I can give you some information that'll help you reflect and think about your teaching and maybe some new ideas of things that can help you. So, for those of you that wonder if it really is sunny in West Des Moines, Iowa, yes, there's really not a question. It is sunny and beautiful here. That should have been an exclamation point. So, there you go. But beach ball teaching. Has anyone ever heard of that before? And you can respond in the chat because I'll be looking at that as I go along. If not, oh good, Pat, thanks for responding. Perfect. I appreciate that. As we look at beach ball teaching, let's go forward and see what that is exactly. So this is an idea. You don't literally have to have a beach ball to teach and operate in this way. However, it starts with some sort of type of question, like me throwing that out to you, all right, where I say, have you heard about this before? So the teacher can physically hold the ball or just hold the question just like that and saying, do any of you know about this method? Some of the uses are particularly for elementary school level would be to write questions and then students would, get the ball and this and that and go back and forth. So you toss the ball to a willing student, the student would answer the question and then kind of toss it back to the teacher. At higher levels of education, we oftentimes will throw out a question, the figurative beach ball to a student. They'll respond or raise their hand, and then they'll throw it back to us as the instructor. And then the game kind of continues. So in theory, it can be a lot of fun, but what's wrong with that type of teaching? So if you look at what we have with question and answer, this is something we as teachers do all the time. So if I throw that question to you, what's wrong with this type of teaching? Or is there anything wrong with it? I'll wait patiently as you respond for a minute. Good, Jake, yeah. Right, we don't want to hurt anyone in the classroom for sure. It can become routine, good. So Jake, I appreciate that response because I'm going to move to the next slide because we only have a short amount of time. So I want to be able to get through our information. Some of you also may be chatting and continuing to put things up. Feel free to do that. But the real issue is that there are limitations to it. Only a few students really interact with the teacher, usually who's ever willing to interact. Just like you guys, I've asked a question and a few of you have responded. There could be up to 25 people at this webinar. However, only a few people are writing something in the chat, right? So I'm not asking all of you to engage. I'm asking those who are willing and able to engage. And so that is part of the issue with this type of teaching, is that only a few students interact with the instructor or other students, and they share their knowledge. And so maybe if one or two get it, as a teacher, we might say, oh, great, it seems like you've got this idea, when maybe the two or three that are willing to answer are the only ones that really have the answer and really understand the concept. So most students sit there passively, and we really have no expectation for them to engage. We're not challenging them to engage. We might go around the room and ask other students that we don't normally call on, or try to get to 3 or 4 other students who don't normally interact. But a lot of times as teachers, we have those go-to students where we will go back and pick out the students who we know will respond and who will likely have the right answer, because that gets everybody else off the hook. So one of the things that I use in class literally daily is the idea of using handouts. And so I think Ryan handed everybody, or emailed everyone, a handout. And like on this slide, it says respond to question 1 on the handout. So in the classroom, we might talk about what beach ball teaching is, and everybody in the classroom would have a handout, and they would have to respond on that handout and answer the question, in this case, question 1, what is beach ball teaching, and what are the advantages and disadvantages of using this type of approach? And so the students, obviously, they're not talking about teaching. I teach economics, management, intro to business, marketing. It would be something related to those subject areas, but they would have to have some sort of response. So I'm forcing them literally to engage. And a lot of people are like, well, yeah, you force a student to engage, but do they get it? If I have the right questions, they will. And that's important for me to make sure I have the right questions. In this case, it's just a surface knowledge kind of a question for you guys. What is beach ball teaching? So some of you came in and bless your hearts, you said, I don't know what this is, so you're trying to figure it out. So this would be a point at which you could recall what exactly beach ball teaching is and what are the advantages and disadvantages. But all students, in order to get some level of credit for that day of participation in the class, would have to write their own answer to that. It also gives me an indication of somebody's writing ability when they submit something to me. Sometimes students struggle with tests, with presentations, with other homework assignments, etc., because they don't have high-level writing skills. And doing this kind of assessment with them each day shows me somewhat their level of writing. And so I can see many things by doing this, not just quote unquote forcing them to interact with me, but the beauty is there are a lot of ways I can use that kind of question and handout to help them interact, to see what they know, and to maybe potentially give me an indication of other potential learning issues that might present an issue in the course later on. So what we want to do is steer students away from being what we call listening objects. And those literally are students who just simply sit and listen as we, as the instructors, deliver our content. And this is so common for people, for young students, for older students, for any student, that we just sit there passively and expect someone to kind of open our heads, dump in information, and then we get it. Well, we don't get it that way. That's not how learning works. In a world where everything is instant everything, we also expect learning to be instant, and it's not. So we don't want to treat people as listening objects. We want to give them the chance to interact back and forth. I literally in class am throwing out question after question after question, making connections with what I've just said to something that they know about, or asking them to make the connection with something they know about. And I'll show you how I do that in a little bit here very specifically. So listening objects are absolutely areas that we kind of want to steer away from in a class, and most students get bored, and for those that are not good at just sitting and listening and absorbing, this is also not a very effective teaching method. So again, going back to helping students engage, I would have just given the definition for listening objectives, then I would have them look at question 2 on the handout. And for you guys, in this particular case, it says, what personal experiences can you relate to the term listening objects? So obviously you would have to know what listening objects means, but then you would also pair that with some connection for the student and ask them to take a few minutes and be reflective and put that down. So it's more than just memorizing a definition and regurgitating it to me. It's how do I make a connection with this content so that I can relate better to it. And that's an important piece. Part of what this kind of a handout allows students to do is pause and process what they're learning. Oftentimes, especially in a college level class, and this is true when I taught at the high school level, we often have so much we want to get through that we want to make sure our time is utilized in a way that's most effective, but that's usually effective for us. And so what we need to do is remember that students need time to process. So for example, today I was teaching about marginal propensity to consume. I know, really engaging, right? And so in economics, and so students, you could tell we're working through the formulas and we were talking about it. And then the real question is, why do we do this? So what? I ask my students that question a lot. It's the so what part of it. And giving them time to pause and process what they're learning helps them review any questions they might have in their head, think through what you said, but also answer the so what portion. Because truly learning is not really learning unless you get the so what. So by doing this, giving them a simple handout with just a few questions, they can jot down their thoughts. I also let them jot down their thoughts, process by themselves, and then do what we call a think, pair, share, where they think and answer their own question. Then they share it, they pair with somebody else, and then they share their response and they talk through it. So if there was any sort of clarity that needed to take place there, sometimes students are better at explaining it to each other. After I've done it, it helps them really get it. And I think that's an important piece for a lot of students. Sometimes they need to have that peer-to-peer conversation. So it also brings up any questions, and they can help articulate the questions by reflecting. What do they not get? How can I help them? That shouldn't be the question, does that make sense? The real question is, what doesn't make sense? And by reflecting, sometimes that will help you in the classroom become a better teacher. It also helps celebrate learning that's going on right now, meaning it gives them the time to reflect and understand what they're trying to learn. I was saying to Ryan earlier that I was at a writers conference this weekend, and I sat in classes from 8 in the morning on Saturday until about 9 o'clock at night, and again from 8 o'clock in the morning until about 4:30 Sunday afternoon. And we never had true designated breaks. If you need to use a restroom, you just got up to go to the restroom, whatever. And part of the challenge in that is, yes, you get a ton of information, excellent information. It's like any conference you ever go to. And then you get back, and when do you have time to process it and celebrate everything that you've learned and use it and enjoy what you have added to your repertoire? And so that's part of a challenge for all of us as teachers, is to know what to do with that. But by giving students opportunities in class and consciously giving them opportunities in class, it helps them learn the material better. So this slide, we actually could do a whole semester's class in, I understand that. So I'm just going to cover them briefly. But by engaging students, they are more apt to learn and enjoy a course that we're teaching. But 4 keys to that are providing clarity to them. What exactly do we want them to know? I get we're covering chapter 2, let's say, in class today, but what should they know from that? And I always give them notes, handouts, a lot of you do the same, that tells them, and it, literally the title of it is, what do I need to know from chapter 2, right? And so I'm showing the students exactly what it is that they need to know and remember through all of the madness of the 20 to 30 pages of text. And then the context, why do they need to know that? Relate it to them in some way. Oftentimes we forget that students don't have a ton of experience, professional experience maybe is a better thing to say. So we need to relate it and put it in context for the experiences they've had to help springboard them into the next level. We also need to challenge them and also create a culture where they know it's okay to learn. It's okay to not know. It's okay to ask the so what. It's okay to ask, ask questions about, how do I do this? Or just say, I don't get it. And that's really an important thing for all of us as teachers. So at this point, what I would do is have you guys, because I've talked, and I understand this is a little bit different format for a webinar, but to look at question 3 that would say, how do I make my course content interesting to students? So, and if a few of you are willing to share, that would be lovely. Just tell me, how do you make your course content interesting to your students? And then also number 4, at the same time, what can I do to better demonstrate why content for each chapter or class session is important for students to understand? So what are you doing currently? And maybe what could you do better? Otherwise, you look like the cartoon for all of us if we don't think about these things. And we just sound like blah, blah, blah to our students as they're thinking about their lunch, their work, their TV show, whatever. If someone wants to share, that would be great. Yes, Louise. For any of you that teach business, I'm assuming several of you do, current events always make a class fresh and interesting. Good. Yeah, Doris, it's amazing. Sometimes we forget, a lot of times people say things about young people that, oh, they don't really care about wisdom. They don't care about your experiences, but they really do. If you've created the culture where they feel comfortable with you and in talking to you and sharing their experiences, they really respect and appreciate yours. Excellent. I'll keep looking in case anyone adds anything else there. Wall Street Journal is an excellent resource. Yeah. And probably, obviously, if we're face to face, we have different kind of discussion. But I'm sure that you guys see that current events are so important for students. I've talked about many things with my students this semester that are going on in the world. And what I love to hear back is, that I really didn't pay attention to this before, but now that we've been talking about it in class, I see this at my job. I heard this on the news. I read this on Twitter, or saw this through YouTube or whatever. And oftentimes they'll send you things back and say, hey, did you see this? And then they're engaged. They may not get an A in the class. Irrelevant, to be honest with you. It's, are they engaged? Are they learning? Are they challenging themselves to learn beyond what the textbook says? That's how they grow. And quite honestly, that's really the purpose of an education. They're not always going to have the textbook, but can they understand when they pick up that Wall Street Journal, what's going on and what it's talking about? That is really what our goal should be and relate back to all the time. Thanks for sharing. I appreciate that. So, enough content of different things. We could talk about pedagogy, honestly, and different teaching methods. I've done that many times in my career. I love to do that. What I wanted to show you are some simple things that you guys actually can do in your classrooms. I have incorporated that into all the instructor materials and PowerPoints and resources for the Introduction to the World of Business textbook that John Mago and I co-authored for Kendall Hunt. That's the reason I'm here. So I wanted to show you a few things, and you can do this with any textbook anywhere. But I did this because I saw a clear lack of interaction with students in a lot of materials. And, a book that is 2 and 3 inches thick is not very appealing to students, and they don't usually read it. And I have to choose what it is I will cover one way or the other. And so it kind of drove me. It wasn't really in my plan ever to write a textbook, to be honest with you, but John approached me and talked about it, and I said, yeah, if we can do these things. So here's some of the things that we did and we added to our materials. Perfect, Allie, yeah. Making it connect back to their personal and professional life is so valuable because then they see themselves in it, right? And that's important for any subject area that we teach. So these are 2 things I give to students for every chapter we cover in Intro to Business. The one on the left starts, and it's just an in-class response sheet. So you'll see what it says, Icebreaker and Think, Pair, Share. I'm going to show you some things on the next few slides that are what I have them fill in there, okay? So those come from our discussion in the class. Obviously, if they're not there, they're not getting those points. And so a fair amount, of their class, part of their class grade, is participation and activities. Can't grade on attendance, so we can grade on participation. And if they're not there to participate, they're not getting the same level of materials. So I also give them a note sheet. And like I told you, I put on there literally, what do I need to remember from chapter 1? And so this is more kind of the nuts and bolts. It helps them to go back and study. But when they go back and study, they know the important topics. I do not test them usually on, here's a term, what's the definition? Or here's the definition, what's the term? It's more of the application and comprehension versus just the straight on knowledge kind of questions. Although I do sometimes do that in an intro to business class. In higher level classes, certainly I'm not asking for definitions. I want to know, can they apply these materials? So I give them this note sheet to help guide them. What I found is many students don't even know how to write their own notes. They try to write absolutely everything you say and or have on a PowerPoint if you're using it, and that just is defeating the purpose a little bit. So I give them a note sheet to guide them. And then in class, when they have that, I open up each class with some quote that's related to the chapter we're covering. I'm a quote person, I like them, and for a lot of students, they find meaning in them as well. So usually I'll have that on the board as they are coming into class. And so it's usually about someone that they would have heard about or read about. A lot of my students have heard about and or read the Rich Dad, Poor Dad materials, and so they enjoy that a lot. So then like an icebreaker, this was just for us for chapter 1. It was just to write down 3 goals that they want to achieve, and then with a partner, then they select one goal and talk about how they're going to accomplish that specifically in the next 6 months. So every student would have to write down their 3 goals in the icebreaker. So I may not get a chance to ask every student what their goals are and what they're going to work on specifically in the next 6 months. However, when they turn it into me, I do go through and review those to make sure everyone is participating. And it's amazing what you find out about your students, particularly the quiet ones. They don't always want to share, but they'll share with a partner, and then I ask them to share out to the class and give a few examples of what goals are and such. But it also helps make the classroom just more of a conversation throughout the semester. And I love that. And even in each chapter, I have some level of an icebreaker that I put up to get them started, to get on track to whatever it is we're going to cover in that week. The Think Pair Shares are just kind of what I discussed earlier, where I throw up a question and I literally title the slide just like this. Like in the instructor materials, the PowerPoints all have these things embedded in them for that textbook. And it's because it is also a constant reminder to myself to let the students stop, reflect on their learning, celebrate what they've learned, connect it to themselves, and I embed those throughout the PowerPoints in the textbook, in the instructor materials for the textbook, I should say. But in this case, the question simply from chapter 1 was, how are workplace challenges of today similar or unique to those experienced in the past? So we talk about workplace challenges, and then I ask them to apply it. And a lot of them will bring in, obviously, current event topics and share what they know and what they've seen at that point. It leads to great discussion then in the class. I also, because everyone always talks about students using technology and always having their cell phones and how distracting that is and yada, yada, yada. To me, they're not really distracting. I use them to my advantage. I tell students that I am going to allow them to use cell phones in class, and then I give them a very specific way to use it as a tool for learning. So a lot of them, you know, if they search for examples of outsourcing in this case, I give them about 5 minutes. They find an example of outsourcing, they write it on their sheet, they write the company in this case, and then, you know, tell me a little bit about that, and they go through these things. And then, you know, if they have time to look at Facebook, great. If they need to send a text message to somebody, great. If they're looking at something, so be it. They've done what I've asked them to do, and they're using their time, and then I ask them to put them away, and they do. And it's really never a problem. It's like I give them and I build into the class somewhere this time for them to get their fix, right? And so they don't really think much about it after that. They've used it, and then they put it away, and then they come back and they're focused on whatever it is we're doing. And that has worked actually really, really well. And you could do this anytime. And so they know when this slide comes up that says technology time, they know, they just pull out their cell phones. I don't even have to say anything anymore. I just tell them what they're looking for. And it gives them that kind of mental break. It lets them thumb through some things and find exactly what Thomas and Allie were saying, that they're finding relevant things out there and connect it to those concepts that are going on in the real world, which is great. and then they share it, and they're excited to share what they found. At the end of each chapter we cover, this is just a very quick assessment. This is also included on the handout sheet, the in-class response sheets that I have them fill out. So it's a quick assessment at the end. More often than not, quite honestly, I'm not grading it to see, oh, they got this one right, this one wrong, blah, blah, blah. I'm looking at it from the sense of, this is our discussion. So I give them a few moments to answer just these 3 questions, just a touch pulse, you know? And then we go back and we review the answers. And we talk about, if the first one is false, why is that false? And we talk about that, and then they add to that discussion. And again, it makes it okay for them to be wrong, but it also gives me an indication about maybe what we talked about was either missed or understood, whichever the case might be. So that is part of why I do that. Again, it's just part of that formative assessment. Doris, good question. This I put on the handout sheet that I give to students. So at the bottom of the sheet that they're filling out with the technology time and think, pair, share, and the icebreakers, I have a section that says check for understanding, and it has just a 1, 2, and a 3, and they have to write true or false there, and then we discuss them in class. But when they turn that sheet into me, then they have to have those answers filled out, obviously. So sometimes, you know, we go through them quickly at the end and have discussion. Most often that's exactly what we do. Sometimes if we're running out of time, I have them fill them out and I'll look at them independently. And if there's something everybody missed, I'll go back and hit that the next time we get together. So there are multiple ways I use it, but always they have to write their answers in order to get credit to that section of the paper. They have to put their own answers there. Does that answer your question?
Jill, I have a question too. This is from a Facebook viewer. Wondering if you could expand on the celebrate learning aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. I think oftentimes we don't really give students a chance to even have the aha moment. And when they do, sometimes we gloss over it. And we get to a point where we just keep moving because we're limited with time. And so by stopping to pause and do these checks for understanding, you are celebrating learning right here. If they get the answer right, they know they've got it. And if they get it wrong, they know they missed something. We talk about it, and then they're like, ah, got it. And that's celebrating learning as well. And oftentimes in education, as much as we're all about learning and education, obviously, sometimes we fail to celebrate that we have grown, we have learned. And that's what that's referencing. Research will show, and does show, that taking that time builds students' self-confidence and strengthens their ability and tenacity in learning difficult things. So when we can do it at any point, it strengthens them as learners. Other questions? This next piece, feel free to keep feeding questions in the chat or online, however they come in. I'm happy to answer them as we go. An activity time, I always pull in something that's an active learning activity, either in the middle, sometimes it's the beginning, sometimes middle, sometimes the end of our session. Again, these things are all embedded in the instructor materials and PowerPoints within this particular textbook. And I did that so that, again, you have time to break things up and let students celebrate their learning through an activity. So in this case, and one of the ones I use often in chapter 1, is how much profit do they think that, you know, a business makes on every dollar in sales? And it's great because so many of them work for, you know, fast food or retail stores, clothing stores, and they think that, you know, a business must make 90 cents on every dollar that they have in sales. And so I let them kind of guess in different industries, from a car industry to banking industries, to retail, to food service, etc. And I let them guess. there's no risk. Let them guess. What do they think that somebody makes on every dollar, right? And so they then will come back and I'll show them a website that gives them those answers, and they're shocked to see that they're making, 8 cents on every dollar versus the 90 cents that they thought was there. So it's really fun, and they're activities that get them involved. So the Facebook viewer question, how much prep time is required to utilize this teaching method? Because I created the whole book like this, anyone that adopts this particular book has it all there. It's done. It's ready to go. For any other class that I use it in, I slowly, for each class, develop them. So I don't know, I might take an hour or so, maybe 2 hours up front, and then I just kind of modify them after that. And so I'm constantly reevaluating and revising anything I teach or use, but it does take time, certainly. I think once you get a few things down, a lot of, even like the in-class activity response sheets, a lot of that you could copy and paste, and then you have the structure that you need. You just need to think of what, questions do I want to ask? What true and false do I want to have? Those types of things. So for anyone, like I said, adopting this particular textbook, certainly this is all done. But for any other class that I teach, because I do use other textbooks, obviously, haven't quite had time in my life to write them all, but nor do I have plans to, honestly. But I do spend a few hours a week up front as I do all of these things, and then spend time revising them from semester to semester. So then the time is far less great than it is up front. Good questions. Love them. So obviously, we all know there are tons of benefits to engaging students, and it really makes learning much more interesting. The students become passionate about your subject. Like I said earlier, when they start coming to you and saying, I found this. I've had students go to used book sales like at Planned Parenthood in our neighborhood and bring me back economics cartoon books, things like that, because they're like, I thought you would love this. And it's just really sweet. And what I love to see is their joy in learning. And it does create that joy in the classroom for them, but also for me as the instructor. I get far more energized. Students are involved. They're not just sitting there complacently and saying, hey, what are you going to teach me today? It's really, what are you going to learn? And how are you going to show me that you've learned it? And that's a fully different approach than me just lecturing and giving them information and hoping that they get it. I'm trying to make sure that they do, and trying to ask the right questions and get the right engagement from them right up front from day one of class through the final day that we're together. I'm giving them things and asking them to be engaged in their own learning. I do honestly tell my students up front, please don't think you're going to come and just sit here and do nothing, because that's not going to happen. And, at first some of them kind of roll their eyes at you like, whatever, lady, I just want to sit here, feed me, right? And after a while, they know I'm not kidding. I keep asking the so what. I keep calling on students. I keep going around. They have to fill out their sheets. And, they like it better. They do. No one loves doing assignments that I've ever really, truly met. Maybe a very few. But beyond that, we have to do something as instructors to help them see that learning is fun, it is engaging, and it really does relate to whatever it is that they're doing in their lives. So to me, I love this quote by Angelo and Cross. It's a really old quote. Look at the date on this, but it's still relevant today, that teaching without learning is just talking. So with that, if you would like to contact me, if you want more information, certainly feel free to contact me. I know Ryan also has my information, and there's the URL for our textbook, which is there in the corner, the Intro to Business textbook. If you have questions about that, let me know. I'm happy to answer that. And yes, my little Priscilla's Perfect Tea Party is a totally different realm of children's writing, and I'm excited to know that's coming out in a few weeks here. So with that, I'm happy to open it up for further questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jill. One question I have personally is, how have your students reacted using this new method?
I think I've actually used the method personally for years with this particular class and putting the textbook together. It makes sense to them. The chapters in the textbook, for any of you that I'm sure maybe a lot of you have not seen it, we tried to make them shorter so that they're very much focused on intro. I'm not trying to teach a whole semester of marketing in a couple chapters. I'm really going back to the intro kind of things that will springboard them into a marketing class. And the book has tables and charts, pictures, etc. that flow. It's not a lot of extra kind of material like extra case studies or spotlights or things like that. The students really react well to that. I would probably have a little bit of a biased response from them because I am their teacher, but they I think that they're honest with me as well because I asked them to be. And I've told them in the last few years I revised the book, and this will be our 3rd edition coming out next fall. And we revise it every time based on student input. So we really do lean to them, and they really appreciate that it's a book they will actually read and content that they really get involved with, which I appreciate a lot. Doris, I'm quite sure that Ryan will be happy to send out a copy of the textbook to review.
Yeah, it looks like Thomas, I can do that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will definitely do that.
Yeah, and if you guys get it and have questions, feel free to email me. I'm happy, excuse me, I'm happy to get on a chat with you guys like this or something else and show you the materials that we have. Happy to do that.
It looks like Ali has a question as well. Are there any digital technology that you use or know about that can test knowledge and learning on the spot?
You mean like clickers or with the textbook itself? I can show you, let me show you a slide here. This is what the website looks like for our book. So this is the student view, and this is just chapter 1 because I showed you everything else from chapter 1. So this is what they would see, and there are key terms. I post a student PowerPoint here as well that they can access. It doesn't have all of the think, pair, shares. I put some other video clips and things in the instructor materials that I do not put in the student. It's really a stripped down version of that. But the notes handout is there, so if somebody wants to do their notes outside of class, they can download those things. There's a case study that they can respond to, and that feeds through the system. The interactive exercises also can be graded. Those are things like literally like moving bubbles or crossword puzzles, things to get in and kind of practice the skills of that. And then there's a quiz. That's just true and false questions that are posted there. So all of these elements are already embedded in the course. But I have used clickers in the classroom. They have like Kahoot you can use in the classroom. There are a lot of different digital technologies that would easily be incorporated into any classroom. The one caution I would say there is sometimes us, meaning instructors, get professional development on something, and then everybody's suddenly using it, and so that's not new to students. That quickly can become boring or overused. So you got to be a little bit careful with that. But there's a ton of great digital technology out there.
And on a side note, Kendall Hunt has developed an app that students can purchase where we can upload questions. I'm sure, Jill, your questions, if they're multiple choice, can be added to this app. Yeah. And the student can do quizzes and get the correct answer immediately. And that's just a small fee to any adopter or author. So that's another, it's called the KHQ. I can send some information on that if you're interested. It's a really nice app. Students can study on their own time. So.
Yeah, and in fact, I know in the 3rd edition, they're looking at a different user interface for students. So for those of you that want to review the materials, if there's something you're not seeing or that you're wanting, again, shoot me an email because I always appreciate the feedback. But as the other side of that, this is what the instructor resource side of the webpage looks like. And all the in-class activities that we do are listed there for the different chapters, all the PowerPoints or test banks. There's an instructor manual, information guide about how to work with Kendall Hunt's platform. In this case, it's called Great River Learning. But it's all there I appreciate you all coming and spending your time with me. Like I said, I'm more than happy to answer questions or get feedback from you. I'll put my email in the chat for you guys.
Great. And in addition, all the attendees will receive a recording of this webinar that you can review. And if you have additional questions, I'll forward the sales rep's information as well if you are interested in a complimentary copy of the book. And Jill, I'll make sure to include your email address in that as well.
Okay, perfect.
All right, and thanks so much for your time, Jill. It was great hearing from you.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, on behalf of all the attendees, thank you so much. I know I learned a lot and look forward to utilizing some of this as I coach baseball. So we're going to celebrate learning at the end of practices. So,
there you go. Perfect.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks so much, and have a great day, everyone.
Thanks so much. Take care.